Good afternoon. The first item of business is time for reflection. And our time for reflection leader today is Reverend Julie Moody, Minister, Milton of Campsie Parish Church.
Presiding Officer, members of the Scottish Parliament and guests, good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to lead your time for reflection. Jesus was a master storyteller, drawing people into deep truths by using everyday images. He once told a story of two builders, one who chose the easy option, convenience and speedy results, over the alternative chosen by the other of a more laborious approach with deep foundations. When the storm came, only one house survived, thus illustrating Jesus' question, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say?" And we find that in Luke chapter 6. Our actions need to back up our words. Upon what foundation are we building our lives? It must be robust, for anything flimsy will simply fall with the first storm. Choose to be a wise, rather than foolish, builder. Jesus' short parable has significant challenge. The work of the Scottish Parliament for 2026 has already begun. It's an election year, and you will all be very busy. Your constituents have expectations about your availability, your engagement, your visibility. For some, their basic existence may hinge on the decisions this Parliament makes, the laws it enacts, the justice it pursues, the budget it agrees, the compassion it demonstrates, its mandate for service. What a responsibility! What a privilege! Within my parish, I too hold the tension of responsibility and privilege. How do I minister to those whose reality mean that they are lonely today, or terrified, weary, stuck, or seeking purpose? Like you, the Church has a role in meeting the needs of the most vulnerable, of offering practical help, of bringing hope into dark situations. A lot of words are spoken in this chamber, in the committee rooms, in churches. Ideas get teased out, discernment is sought, plans are made. But those we serve need much more than our words, for they will be forgotten in the first storm. They need action, solid foundations, and lived-out principles. Churches in your constituencies need to heed Jesus' warning and live out his mandate to care for the marginalised, the weak, and the overlooked, and to challenge those who are comfortable. And those who live in these parishes, who are your constituents, will be looking to this Parliament for action that confirms your rhetoric, justice which underlines your principles, and compassion that demonstrates your humanity. May God grant each of you the grace to be a wise builder. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Moody. The next item of business is topical questions, and at question number 1, I call Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that the former Chief Executive of CalMac received a severance package exceeding £170,000, including whether this complied with the severance provisions set out in the Scottish Public Finance Manual.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
CalMac has confirmed in response to these press reports that its former CEO did not receive a severance package of £170,000. They confirmed that payments consisted of salary and pension payments to which the CEO was entitled, in addition to payments for compensation for loss of office. At the time the settlement agreement was proposed, CalMac initially indicated the settlement agreement would be £95,000, in line with the requirements of the Scottish Public Finance Manual. We have recently been advised by CalMac that this figure did not include accrued holiday pay as it should have, and payment for this was subsequently added. In including these, the final payment that reflected compensation settlement was £107,635, and therefore above the threshold where they should seek ministerial approval. Given the level of settlement, this decision should have come to ministers, and I therefore find this position to be entirely unsatisfactory. The Permanent Secretary has undertaken to look further into the circumstances around the settlement, and officials have now written to the CalMac CEO and Chair, reminding him of the need to comply with the Scottish Public Finance Manual and seeking a full and detailed explanation as to why due process was not followed in this case.
Jamie Green.
I have to say I'm glad I asked, because it's difficult to see whether any of this would ever come to the public light. The Scottish Public Finance Manual is abundantly clear on what the process is around severance packages. Any payments over £95,000 must seek ministerial views. Section 7.5 of the Code is clear. Ministers views must be obtained in any particularly high-profile cases, and I have to say the exit of CalMac is a particularly high-profile case. So, in light of what the Cabinet Secretary has just said, can I ask, therefore, at what point did the Cabinet Secretary know that this payment had been made? Was it after the payment had been made? One presumes so. At any point up until that, did anyone in the government or the civil service receive a business case for the severance package? And if so, who signed it off?
Cabinet Secretary.
So a number of points in there. In terms of the notice, ministers were given information that there would be a settlement. Obviously, it's up to CalMac Board to make decisions about employment positions. The officials, therefore, did sign off the business case. There was a business case. He sets out what is in the Financial Manual well. That is exactly the process. But, of course, and I might also add that the then Director of the Ferries Directorate in Transport of Scotland did write to CalMac to say that if there was anything in excess of £95,000 that they would require a new business case. That was alerted to them. Clearly what's happened in this process is that the accrued holiday pay of some £12,000, just over, that should have triggered the different process as is set out. Now, as I've indicated, we do take this seriously, and the Permanent Secretary is going to undertake to look further into the circumstances as to why this additional £12,000 on accrued holiday pay hadn't been added to the original amount and therefore triggered what would have been a requirement for ministerial approval.
Jamie Green.
I'm still none the wiser as to whether the Cabinet Secretary knew about the scale of the payment that would be made and when that information was made available to government. The Cabinet Secretary has just stated that the government were told that there would be a payment, so that presumably means that they were told in advance of the payment being made, but it sounds like they were given the wrong information about the value of the payment that would be made. The total value thus taking them over the limit at which ministers would have had to have intervened to authorise it. The whole thing is entirely unacceptable, and I think just chucking CalMac under the bus is not the answer here, because this is symptomatic of a repeated series of events where high-profile heads of public agencies have departed with very substantial golden goodbyes, of which the government payments. This is yet another example of that. Can I therefore ask if the government will open up an internal inquiry to the bottom of how these endless and repeated breakdowns in the process are happening, and will the government get a grip of these severance payments once and for all?
Cabinet Secretary.
So can I make it clear that in terms of what would be seen as the settle agreement, payment in lieu of notice, the compensation for loss of office, which would be identified as settlement, legal fees and, as I said, the holiday pay accrual. I don't think it's satisfactory if the procedures aren't followed, and I do accept that the Permanent Secretary, in undertaking further into circumstances, I'm sure will want to indicate how the process is dealt with by, for example, public corporations such as CalMac.
Katie Clark.
My member's bill on freedom of information includes a provision that public bodies proactively publish information. The Information Commissioner has ruled that CalMac breached freedom of information rules by withholding information relating to severance payments, and that there is a legitimate public interest in knowing how much senior executives in public bodies are paid on exit. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with the aims of my Freedom of Information Bill that would require bodies like CalMac to proactively publish such information as severance payments for senior executives?
Cabinet Secretary.
So clearly, any situation that involves employment legislation, and she'll know from her professional background, has to be treated carefully in relation to the employment law as applied in any individual case. I would point out, however, that the information, and the reason it probably has come to light, is if you look at the annual report and accounts of CalMac, the compensation for loss of office is identified along with salary and along with employers' pensions contribution. So actually the information she's seeking is actually publicly available.
Edward Mountain.
And I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her early answers. I'm slightly confused here. Robbie Drummond worked for 3 days in that year and seems to have been paid £35,000 for each day he worked. Seems to be high by even anyone's standard. So can we just have a definitive answer, Cabinet Secretary? Did you agree it or did you not agree it? And do you think £35,000 a day is appropriate? Simple questions.
Always through the chair, please.
Sorry.
Cabinet Secretary.
So simply, it is for the board of CalMac to make those decisions, which they did. In terms of employment contracts, he will know that different people in different employments will have different severances. And in terms of understanding that there would be a situation where there would be a severance payment, that did not come to ministers for approval because it wasn't required at that time, because at that point the level was at £95,000. With the accruement of holiday pay, that's what took it over £12,000 more than that, and that's what should have come to me, and that's what I am not satisfied with, and is why I think that the examination of this is quite appropriate by the Permanent Secretary.
Order Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This is not the first severance package being paid to a Chief Executive of CalMac, and that's all due to the SNP's government's mismanagement of our ferries. Meanwhile, the only people not being compensated for the ferry fiasco are the islanders, who are suffering as a consequence. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary when they will be paid compensation and when a permanent compensation package will be put in place?
It's somewhat wide of the substantive question. Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, it is, but I'll try and address it if I can. So across the transport modes, we are not paying compensation for disruptions. We've seen, for example, on the recent truck roads, etc. However, she will know that this government is very cognisant of the business resilience issues within our islands, and that is why Mari Gujan, as the Rural and Islands Affairs Cabinet Secretary, has provided £4.4 million for business resilience to different islands that have been affected and impacted, and indeed that was recently expanded to include, for example, Isla, Jura, Mull and indeed other islands.
Question number 2, Paul O'Kane.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports of a postcode lottery for classroom supplies, and that some schools have only 93 pence per week per child for basic classroom supplies. Cabinet Secretary Jenny Gilruth.
This government has increased funding for education. The Education and Skills Resource budget rose in 25-26 by £165 million to over £3.2 billion. Local government also received a record £15 billion in 25-26, with an increase of over £1 billion to support on education and other local services. Scotland has the highest spend per pupil in the United Kingdom at £10,100 per pupil, approximately 20% higher than spending per pupil in other parts of the United Kingdom. And it is essential that funding protected by this government centrally gets to the chalk face in our classrooms where it will make the biggest difference. That is why I recently appointed John Wilson, a respected former head teacher, to lead work nationally which will interrogate issues pertaining to governance and school funding.
Paul O'Kane.
The analysis of FOI data from local authorities reported at the weekend showed that 6 of the 8 lowest spending councils rank among the areas with the most deprived neighbourhoods, with some schools spending less than £1 per child per week on classroom supplies. And in response to these findings, a Scottish Government spokesperson, and we heard a lot of this echoed by the Cabinet Secretary in her answer, pointed to the funding, particularly funding through the Scottish Attainment Challenge, including pupil equity funding, which is supposed to go directly to schools in the most deprived communities to support children affected by poverty. So, isn't it clear that year upon year of reductions and cuts to council budgets is leading councils to have to make decisions like this, and actually the money that's meant to be additional, that's meant to add to our anti-poverty strategies and closing that attainment gap, is not getting to where it needs to go? I noticed she mentioned John Wilson, but doesn't the Cabinet Secretary recognise her own responsibility in this? And what confidence does she have the funds given by her government to tackle inequality are being used effectively? And what analysis has she done of that?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Mr O'Kane for his question. There were a number of different points in there, Presiding Officer. I will try to come to mindful of time. He is absolutely correct to say that PEF funding should be additional in relation to school budgets, and that's the way in which it has been protected by this government through budgetary processes. And of course, I observed the Scottish Labour Party were unable to support the previous budget. But in terms of the FOI data itself, as I understand it, we do not have FOI data from all local authorities on this issue. And I think it's also important to note that the article in question that Mr O'Kane cited noted that the data can be recorded differently from council to council, and most of the figures, as we understand it, relate to 24-25 financial year. Of course, these figures were obtained by a tabloid newspaper. However, to the substantive point that Mr O'Kane makes, it is important we have an understanding at central government level of how this additionality is being used and in relation to school supplies. That's why I've asked officials and education analysts to give me a fuller update in that regard, because these measurements differ by local authority. But it is the case, Presiding Officer, that there has been an increase to the education budget, which of course Mr O'Kane and his colleagues were unable to support in last year's budget.
Paul O'Kane.
Thank you. I do find it extraordinary that in the final months of this Parliament we're just getting round to analysing exactly what is happening in terms of that spend in schools. And I find that shocking, but I actually think our teachers and our parents across Scotland will find that shocking as well, because this is a government who promised to close the poverty attainment gap a decade ago but have failed to deliver. A government that already presides over massive disparities in attendance rates, whilst we are still well below pre-COVID level, and has allowed violence and bad behaviour in our classrooms to go on the rise. And it's an SNP government that promised a parliament of COVID recovery and education, and yet, in the Cabinet Secretary's own words, 5 years later, we've only just turned a corner. Scotland's once excellent schooling system has been undermined by the SNP over the last 2 decades, and this latest reporting is just the latest evidence for it. I mean, I hear the First Minister groaning. He had quite a lot to do with it from memory.
Question,
so can I ask
please,
the Cabinet
Mr.
Secretary,
O'Kane,
as a former teacher herself, does she think it is acceptable spending less than £1 per child per week on classroom supplies, and would that have effectively happened under her watch when she promised COVID recovery?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, like Mr O'Kane, I agree that governments should protect and enhance education spending. That is why, in last year's Scottish Government budget, this SNP government did exactly that, with a resource increase of over 3%. We provided extra money to councils for more teacher numbers, we provided extra money to councils for additional support needs, and we provided a record settlement to local government. Now, Scottish Labour's response to that record increase for the education portfolio was to sit on their hands. Now, this year, we hear from Mr O'Kane's boss, Anna Starwer, that Scottish Labour are not in a strong negotiating position over the budget. In a parliament of minorities, Presiding Officer, these benches might have expected Scottish Labour were in a prime position to force the hand of this government. Instead, just like last year, they opt out. That is a dereliction of duty from the Scottish Labour Party, Presiding Officer. They are happy to opine over FOIs and press comment, but when it comes down to it, they can't even bring themselves to push the button to secure more investment for Scotland's schools.
Thank you. Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Now, we all know that it's crucial that Scotland's classrooms provide positive learning environments to support children and young people. How is the Scottish Government funding improving the pupil-teacher ratio and, in turn, learning environments, as well as to address the cost of the school day for children most impacted by poverty?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as I've set out, thanks to additional investment secured in last year's budget and the efforts of education authorities, the census data which published in December showed an increase in the number of teachers in our schools for the first time since 2022, which is to be welcomed. But it also showed an improvement in pupil-teacher ratios, and our continued investment in relation to the Scottish Attainment Challenge over the past decade is helping to drive improvements at local authority level and in our schools, as can be evidenced by the very welcome progress we saw in the ACIL data which published in December.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions. The next item of business is a statement by Shona Robison on the Scottish Budget 2026 to 27. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on the Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, today I present a budget for Scottish families, a budget for a stronger NHS, and a budget for investment in Scotland's infrastructure. As a result of the decisions that I am announcing today, some of the pressure on families and family budgets will ease. There will be more operations and appointments in our health service, and it will be easier to access a GP. College funding will grow, giving our young people more opportunities to learn and flourish. Life will be a little easier for parents with more wraparound childcare. And more young Scots will be able to find a home that they can love and can afford, helping them to build a more secure future right here in Scotland. This is a government that wants what is best for Scotland, and that's why we will continue to offer and continue to expand the best cost of living support package available anywhere in the UK. My message to the people of this country is clear. Thanks to our cost of living commitments, you will be better off in so many ways because you live in Scotland, and better off because Scotland is led by the SNP.
Thank you. Thank you.
Today, Presiding Officer, I am very proud to present a budget for Scotland with an investment of almost £68 billion in the well-being of our people and in the future prosperity of our nation. And to present our multi-year spending plans with total investment of almost £200 billion, the Scottish Spending Review and the Infrastructure Investment Pipeline demonstrate the scale of our ambition for our nation. Presiding Officer, I will begin today where I left off in my budget last year. Just over a year ago, I stood in this chamber and announced our intention to scrap the cruel two-child cap. It was widely welcomed across Scotland, but the representatives of the UK governing party in this Parliament couldn't bring themselves to vote for it. It has taken the UK government almost a year to catch up, but I am pleased that they have done so. The Scottish Government will now go further and do more. Instead of mitigating yet another damaging Westminster policy, we can use the £126 million released in this coming year to keep even more Scottish children out of poverty. Our aim is to target all of these extra resources in the most effective way, to ensure a maximum impact on those families in greatest need by increasing their income and reducing their costs. That means this year, as part of a £50 million whole family support package, specific additional support for colleges as part of ongoing initiatives to raise income through skills and education so people can find work and better paid work. It means action to remove transport barriers that can make it difficult for some to access work, and additional resources for key third sector partners to target more precisely on those families who are hardest to reach. It means a further £49 million this year for measures that we will announce in the updated Child Poverty Delivery Plan in March, as we strive to reduce child poverty faster and further. In 26-27, the transformational Scottish Child Payment will, of course, increase with inflation, and because of choices made in this budget, from 27-28 we will go further and boosting the payment for families with a baby under 1 to £40 a week. Presiding Officer, the first year of a baby's life is one of the most exciting times for any family, but we know this time can bring extra stress and costs too. And that's why this government is delivering the strongest package of support for families with young children anywhere in the UK, from the baby box to Best Start payments and, of course, our game-changing Scottish Child Payment. This support for mums and dads will help them through that critical first year of their child's life, delivering the best start in life for children and for families. This commitment speaks to who we are as a government, to our values and our ambition for each and every child in our land. And to deliver even more for those with the least, we'll ask those with the most, the very wealthiest in our land, to contribute that little bit more. That includes the introduction by April 2028 of 2 new council tax bands for the most expensive properties in Scotland, those worth over £1 million on an up-to-date valuation. That measure that will bring greater fairness as well as increased revenues to councils. And from April 2027, the air departure tax will come into force, and will shortly launch a consultation on a new Highlands and Islands exemption, continuing to exempt domestic flights. Through this new framework, we'll introduce a private jet tax. And I say to those who choose to travel by private jet, in Scotland you will pay a fair share for that privilege. And in doing so, you'll be helping us make Scotland the fairer nation we all know it can and should be. Presiding Officer, self-government works for Scotland. The choices we're able to take in this, our national parliament, make a real difference for the people we serve. Our choices mean that child poverty in Scotland is at a 30-year low and has been falling in Scotland while it's risen elsewhere on these isles. Achieved because we can build a social security system that is more compassionate and a tax system that is more progressive. Decisions taken by this Parliament and this Government have played a key role in reducing carbon emissions in Scotland by more than half. Public health has been advanced, with Scotland taking the lead on action to reduce the harm from alcohol and through transformational measures such as the HPV vaccination. The amount of electricity generated from renewable sources has increased more than fourfold since 2008, a step change that should mean substantially lower energy bills and will mean lower energy bills when Scotland's energy is in Scotland's hands.
Thank you. Thank you.
Electrification of key rail routes, improving journeys for tens of thousands of commuters, and ScotRail has, of course, been brought in to public ownership. We're able to replace the UK's costly PFI with a more cost-effective alternative, which in turn has enabled us to build hundreds of new schools and substantially upgrade hundreds of others. And we have abolished Thatcher's right to buy, which means after years when the number of socially rented homes was falling, they are once again increasing in Scotland. Indeed, since 2007, we've delivered more than 141,000 affordable homes, of which 101,000 have been for social rent. Scotland has been changed for the better by this Parliament and by this SNP government. But we're determined to go further. And that's why this budget is not only focused on securing the gains that have been made, but moves forward to take the best next steps for our nation. Because when decisions about Scotland are taken here in Scotland by a government that puts the people of Scotland first, transformational change can and does happen. This is a budget focused on delivery and on hope, on a stronger NHS and on a brighter future for Scotland and the people who live here. Presiding Officer, this is a budget that will direct more public spending to the front line. At its very heart is a commitment to effective and efficient policy delivery through a more modern public sector and smarter use of technology, including digital delivery, making it easier for citizens to access the services they need. Our approach to public sector reform will deliver £1.5 billion in efficiencies, helping us protect frontline services from the worst impacts of a tightening fiscal environment, not least due to constraints the UK Government has put on Scotland's budget, including the near £400 million shortfall in funding as a result of the Chancellor's decision to increase employers' national insurance contributions. Our ambition is clear: a Scotland where public services work seamlessly for people, modern in their design and delivery, accessible where and when they are needed, flexible in how they respond, and consistently focused on the best outcome. In short, public services are centred on the needs of the citizen, not the needs of the system. But of course, for this budget to pass and for the benefits to be felt by families across Scotland, we need support and votes from other parties across this chamber. As before,
let's hear one another.
As before, my aim has been to seek common ground. Thanks to constructive pre-budget engagement, key priorities of opposition members have been included alongside the priorities of this government in my budget plans today. That includes, among other things, more money to improve neurodevelopmental assessments and care for children and young people, additional investment for Changing Places toilets, resources to support bus franchising, and support for the redevelopment of Edinburgh's King's Theatre. From our budget conversations, I have no doubt that members across the chamber will also welcome actions in other key areas. That includes our commitment to the communities affected by the closure of Moss Moran, who will receive targeted support of £9 million over the next 3 years. Our commitment to the residents of Shetland and Orkney, who will benefit from lower costs as we scrap peak fares for islanders on the Northern Isles ferries. And our commitment to the college sector, which will see a substantial 10% increase in funding. That is £70 million extra this year. Alongside this, the Scottish Funding Council, supported by the Scottish Futures Trust, will be working with colleges, including Forth Valley and Dundee and Angus, to develop a comprehensive infrastructure investment plan that addresses local priorities. Presiding Officer, this is a budget for a stronger health service. A budget which protects and enhances the best cost of living support package available anywhere in the UK. It's a budget worthy of support. For our NHS, it delivers a record £17.6 billion for frontline services, £2.4 billion to support the vital work of GPs, primary care and community services, and over £2.3 billion of support for social care. It means our health service will have the resources it needs to continue reducing waiting times, to continue cutting waiting lists. And I commend NHS staff for the work that they are doing right now to cut the longest waits, something now achieved for 6 months in a row. There will be more operations and appointments, building on the targeted investment in last year's budget, which has seen a record number of hip and knee procedures and an increase in both inpatient and outpatient appointments. We know what works, and we're investing at record levels so our NHS can do more of it. And there will be significant new investment in our staff, higher wages, improved training and action to support staff well-being, retention and work-life balance. The NHS is nothing without its staff, and I want them to hear loud and clear that they are respected and valued. Thanks to their efforts, the NHS is already getting better, and this budget will continue to support them as they work tirelessly to put patients first. And for the social care sector, today's budget will enable further action to reduce delayed discharges, as the Health Secretary will set out following engagement with local government and health and social care partners. It also provides the resources needed to ensure that where we commission services, those working in adult social care receive as a minimum the real living wage. Once again this year, a bigger share of the health budget is going to primary care. And that means the number of GPs in Scotland will continue to rise, and more GPs will mean easier access. And because we are committed to ending the 8 a.m. rush, this budget contains £36 million to begin the rollout of new high street walk-in GP clinics, with the first coming soon. Our ambition is to deliver the best care at the right time in the right place, free at the point of need. That includes an ongoing expansion of our Hospital at Home programme so that more people can receive the care they need in the comfort and security of their own home. And have no doubt, We have an NHS in Scotland that is on the path to recovery, an NHS that after COVID, after such a huge shock to the system, is getting better. This is a budget that will enable our health services to do more and to do it better. I have no doubt our constituents will not look favourably, and that is an understatement on any party that can't bring themselves to back a budget that offers so much for our NHS.
Thank you. Thank you.
Presiding Officer, this is a budget for the well-being of our people and for the prosperity of our nation. A society where the needs of people and planet are to the fore. For the planet, that means we'll continue to play our part in global efforts to tackle the growing climate emergency. That includes an ongoing commitment to decarbonise our economy, with investment to support more carbon-free transport, more carbon-free heating for businesses and homes, and to continue the expansion of renewable electricity generation around our shores. Taken together, we're committing over £5 billion this coming year towards measures that will reduce Scotland's carbon emissions, increase our resilience in the face of climate change, and in many cases save families hard-earned cash. It's an investment in our landscape and our natural environment, assets that are priceless in themselves, but also of vital importance economically. I think of food and drink and tourism sectors that are flourishing and vital to our health and our sense of self, to our well-being in its fullest sense. And it's an investment in those who care for our land, in our rural communities and our farmers, including a new package to nurture and develop regenerative and sustainable skills in food and farming. Presiding Officer, our commitment to the planet extends, of course, to investment beyond our shores. While others are choosing to reduce their commitment to international development, I'm proud to confirm that here in Scotland we'll increase our International Development Fund by a quarter to £16 million. Different choices, different values.
Thank you.
For our people, this is a budget that delivers record funding to support Scotland's creative and culture sector. As promised, a £20 million increase in the culture budget this year. It's through our songs and our stories that we best express ourselves and best understand ourselves and our place in the world. In these times of uncertainty, in these times when there are so many pressures on family budgets, we can find some solace, maybe even some much-needed escape, in art, in dance, in laughter, in music, and in the shared experience that's a concert or a festival. I think Scotland is richer because of our world-famous culture, and this government stands full square behind our fantastic creative sector. It's a budget that creates new opportunities for Scots to learn and to flourish. That includes not only extra funding for our colleges, but also for our universities, including £20 million for the University of Dundee and an ongoing commitment to Scotland's high-quality apprenticeships, which this year alone will provide more than 31,000 Scots with a pathway to a sustainable, well-paid job. There will be targeted support to ensure critical skills shortages in our offshore renewables sector are met and to help retrain workers in the oil and gas sector. This is a government that is serious about a just transition and serious about making the most of our renewables opportunity. I know also that many young Scots are struggling to get on the housing ladder, struggling to find affordable homes to rent or to buy. So we'll deliver record levels of investment to help deliver even more homes, a new generation of affordable, livable, energy-efficient homes. Our plans provide vital support for children with additional support needs and give local councils the resources they need to continue narrowing the attainment gap and deliver on our commitments on class contact time. Overall, funding for local government will increase by 2% in real terms comparing budget to budget, a settlement that is fair and which recognises the important role of local government in the delivery of key services. Decisions on council tax rates will, of course, be taken locally. However, this is a reasonable deal, and given the cost of living pressures that we all recognise, I urge local authorities to translate this settlement into reasonable decisions on council tax. Presiding Officer, our ambition is for a society that is strong and an economy that is flourishing. Scotland is a nation of innovators, of wealth creators, and this budget is designed to support those whose efforts are essential if our economy is to grow. The most prosperous future for Scotland means being able to use our resources to deliver a clear competitive advantage for Scottish business. And that's why this government believes Scotland's energy resources should, of course, be in Scotland's hands. There's no good reason why Scottish companies are paying such high energy costs. Short of independence, however, there are steps we can and will take to see more direct benefits from our renewables revolution in our economy. That includes in this budget resources to support the creation of a diverse and sustainable supply chain for offshore wind here in Scotland. It means money in this budget to support a just transition for our industrial sector, including targeted investment in the Grangemouth industrial cluster. We're working with our partners in Shetland, Orkney and the Western Isles councils to agree a new accelerator model, a package of funding that is transformative and we believe can unlock hundreds of millions of pounds of investment in these island communities. Alongside this, our new National Islands Plan will take forward priority projects including clean energy, fixed links and other key infrastructure projects. These investments will form part of a capital investment programme worth £7.6 billion, which, given that infrastructure investment is a recognised driver of growth, will deliver significant economic benefits across our economy. It includes investment in our railways, with the delivery of new battery electric trains on the Borders and Fife routes, ongoing investment in the most extensive renewal of our ferry fleet since devolution, and this year it includes also nearly £200 million for the dualling of the A9. And I say this loud and clear, this government is committed to the completion of the A9 by 2035.
Thank you.
And we will take forward dualling of key sections of the A96, and working with partners will ensure a new station at Winchborough is delivered. Presiding Officer, in 2025, Scotland secured a decade-long stretch as the top UK foreign direct investment location outside of London. Central to that achievement is the work of our enterprise agencies and the Scottish National Investment Bank. So I'm pleased to say that this budget delivers on our commitment to invest £1 billion in the bank by the end of the parliamentary term and keeps us on track to invest £2 billion over the first 10 years. This budget will build on that progress with a package of funding to support disadvantaged and underrepresented young entrepreneurs and support companies to scale up. It also means enhanced support for Visit Scotland and a commitment to multi-year funding to further support town centre regeneration. The Small Business Bonus Scheme, which removes the burden of rates from 100,000 properties, businesses like hairdressers, bakers, cafes that form the lifeblood of every community, will be continued for the next 3 years. And in response to concerns in the business community about the recent revaluation, we will reduce the basic, intermediate and higher property rates, while also providing transitional relief worth £184 million over the next 3 years. We'll also provide 15% non-domestic rates relief in 2026-27, and for each of the 3 years of the revaluation cycle, worth £138 million over 3 years for retail, hospitality and leisure premises liable for the basic and intermediate property rate, capped at £110,000 per business per year. In our islands and designated remote areas, that business relief will be 100%. In total, including the small business bonus, over 96% of retail, hospitality and leisure properties will pay zero or reduced rates.
Thank you. Thank you.
Together, Presiding Officer, this provides retail, hospitality and leisure support worth £322 million over the next 3 years. Now, we are still awaiting details from the UK Government about possible changes to business rates for pubs in England following press speculation last week. But I can assure members that if additional resources become available, then we stand ready to use these to provide even further support for the sector in Scotland. There will be no changes to land and building transaction tax, and will continue to match UK rates with the Scottish landfill tax. Presiding Officer, this is a government that cares about Scotland and all of our people. That means we will work harder than anyone else to secure the best possible deal for our nation and its people. Above all, that means a commitment to deliver the best cost of living support package available anywhere on these isles. The best cost of living deal in Britain is getting better. And it is not only about the cost of living, but just as importantly, it's about the quality of life. Free prescriptions, a saving of £9.90 per item compared to England, continued. Free eye examinations, a saving of £25 compared to England, continued. Average council tax and water bills still lower than in England and Wales. Peak rail fares abolished, and abolished for as long as there is an SNP government. Young Scots protected from a debt burden approaching £30,000 because tuition fees in Scotland are free, and free for as long as there is an SNP government. The baby box containing items worth £400, a gift to every new baby born in our land. Free school meals for thousands in our schools, including pupils from P1 to P5. Free bus travel for all young Scots under 22 and older Scots over the age of 60. 40 hours of free, high-quality early learning and childcare worth around £6,000, welcomed, I know, by thousands of young parents. All policies that help with the cost of living, but more than that, all policies focus in different ways on the well-being of our citizens at each and every stage of their lives. Presiding Officer, the choices made in this budget enable us to go further and do more. That includes funding to deliver, by August 2027, a breakfast club for every single Scottish primary and special school. So what does that mean in practice? Well, it means that the morning rush to get everyone organised and out of the house becomes that little bit easier. The chance to drop kids off earlier at school, perhaps open up new shifts at work. For some, families saving on the cost of breakfast. For others, the kids getting a breakfast that they wouldn't otherwise receive, fueling them to learn. Our plans include also new funding for wraparound activities in the afternoon and early evening. Building on the SFA's excellent Extra Time initiative, the budget will enable us to trial a programme of activities between 3 and 6 p.m. in a range of primary schools, helping to get kids active and offering parents the peace of mind that their children are being looked after free of screens. Again, more wraparound support, giving parents greater flexibility and freedom. And as a third element, more help for parents during the summer holidays. To mark Scotland's hosting of the Commonwealth Games and a welcome return to the Men's Football World Cup, investment in a summer of sport. And I know just how costly it can be for parents to keep their kids entertained during the long summer holiday. So this summer, thousands of young Scots will have access to a range of free sport activities, including, with an eye to future Scottish Commonwealth Games gold medals, a universal Learn to Swim offer for every single primary school child in our land.
Thank you.
It's action by a government that understands the pressures many families are facing. Action that will help to reduce costs, deliver more wraparound care and help keep more Scottish kids out of poverty. Presiding Officer, self-government works because it enables us to take different decisions based on Scotland's distinct circumstances, on our particular priorities and our values. And that's why we've chosen to invest in the well-being of our society, to provide universal access to services that are about leaving more money in people's pockets, yes, but also about solidarity, about a way of seeing the world that reflects who we are as a nation, an approach which is about making life a little bit easier for all. In the recent Westminster budget, the UK Government made choices on tax that, taken together, mean standards of living in the UK will continue to stagnate, or as the First Minister describes it, will remain as flat as a pancake. The Chancellor decided to freeze income tax thresholds, including for the basic rate, which means more of people's hard-earned cash gets taxed or taxed at a higher rate until 2030-31. So I'm making a different choice. I can confirm that this year, while the others remain frozen, the thresholds for the basic and intermediate rates will increase by 7.4%. That is by well over twice the rate of inflation. That is an increase in these thresholds of almost 11% in 2 years. And as a result, even more people in Scotland can expect to pay less tax than if they lived in England, Northern Ireland or Wales. That's over 55% of Scots set to pay less income tax because they live in Scotland and have a government led by the SNP.
Thank you.
Presiding Officer, this is a budget for a stronger NHS, a budget for a more prosperous Scotland, a budget that once again gives the people of Scotland the best cost of living deal anywhere in the UK. It's a budget that offers new ways to access a GP with walk-in GP clinics, new help for hard-pressed families with more wraparound care, new hope for young Scots looking for their first home, more operations, more appointments in our NHS, more people paying less income tax because they live here in Scotland, new help and more help. It's a budget for families, a budget for Scotland, and it's a budget well worth voting for.
Thank you. Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary. Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 60 minutes for questions, after which we'll move on to the next item of business. I'd be grateful if members who wish to put a question were to press their request to speak buttons. And I call on Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This pre-election budget is as predictable as it is cynical. But the problem that John Swinney and Shona Robison face today is that hard-working Scots who are tired of being taxed to hilt by the SNP simply won't wear it. It will not wash, because we know and they know that John Swinney has repeatedly hiked their taxes and will never do what the Scottish Conservatives would do, which is to comprehensively cut tax and increase thresholds now and into the future. And while today's change to thresholds for the basic and intermediate rates are to be welcomed, it does nothing for those people at the middle of the tax band that are paying 50% tax on the pound between £43,000 and £50,000. That is the cost of the SNP. But this budget, like all SNP budgets, is smoke and mirrors, tax and spend, and still prioritises welfare over work, with £650 million extra being spent in the social justice portfolio. But with an election just 113 days away, John Swinney thinks he can morph from Che Guevara into Adam Smith with no intervening steps. But ultimately, nothing has changed, because at its core, this SNP government remains high on tax.
Let's hear Mr Hoy.
On delivery.
Let us hear Mr Hoy.
Mr Swinney chuntering away, because under the SNP today, Scotland still remains the highest tax part of the United Kingdom.
Mr Hoy. Sorry, I'm finding it very difficult to hear, Mr Hoyle. Let's be courteous.
Mr Swinney doesn't want to hear his litany of failure being read out in this chamber, because economic growth is an afterthought. Public services are failing, and businesses deprived of rates relief in full and now still potentially facing huge revaluation bills are continuing to teeter on the brink despite the modest concessions today. So let's look at what Shona Robison has announced. More foreign aid when people are struggling at home. A £36 million increase in the Constitutional and External Affairs budget. A secret stash for his secret plan. And cuts to economically productive areas, including cuts to the budget for the Scottish National Investment Bank and for Scottish enterprise. So does anyone, beyond the SNP's clapping seals, believe that the fundamentals of the Scottish economy will improve as a result of today's budget? So as she prepares to ride off into the sunset, leaving someone else to clear up the mess she's created, I ask Shona Robison this: Will the overall tax burden on Scottish households and Scottish businesses rise or fall as a result of this budget? How many businesses and how many jobs will be lost as a result of this government's failure to pass on in full the rates relief they've received in the past and to create a new system to stop this very damaging rates revaluation? And which infrastructure projects, such as the fuel dualling of the A96, will be shelved as a result of the ongoing gap in this government's capital funding? Presiding Officer, this failing SNP government cannot reverse the rot that has been set into public finances and the £5 billion budget black hole that it still faces. Lily-livered Labour says that they will let this budget pass. The Liberal Democrats look set to be lining up to support it, and Reform are rolling in behind more benefit spending. So ahead of an election which will be defined by the cost of living, isn't the truth this? Only the Scottish Conservatives are standing up for Scottish taxpayers, saving Scotland from an SNP government that relegates growth, puts welfare over work and is still wedded to high tax for hard-working Scots.
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'll tell you what's cynical is having £1 billion of unaffordable, unfunded tax cuts and not telling the public which public services you're going to cut by £1 billion. That is what is cynical. And before we go any further, let me just say here and now, I don't expect a single member of the Tory backbenches here today to ask for a single penny of extra funding for public services, given your front bench would cut them by £1 billion. So we'll not hear any ask for more money. No ask.
Let's hear one another
from the Tory backbenches. So let me say this. As I set out in my statement, the estimates from the impact of this budget will mean that 55% of taxpayers will pay less in Scotland. It actually rises to 57% after costs like pension deductions. And on business, I have set out that we'll decrease the basic, intermediate and higher property rates in 26-27, ensuring the lowest basic property rates since 2018-19. And as I said in my statement, taking all of the measures together, around 89,000 properties, or 96% of all retail, hospitality and leisure properties, will benefit from zero or reduced rates. I would have thought that's something that even Craig Hoy could have welcomed.
Michael Mara.
Presiding Officer, this budget does not meet the aspirations of the people of Scotland, and it does not recognise their need for real change. What it does represent is a 19th John Swinney budget, more of the same. And everyone in Scotland knows what that means. Hundreds of thousands in pain on NHS waiting lists, a justice system past breaking point, an education system going backwards day by day. Over 10,000 kids waking up each day in temporary accommodation with no home to call their own. Scottish Labour has delivered an additional £10.3 billion for Scotland's budget, and it's only this knackered SNP government who could turn a £10.3 billion uplift into a £1.6 billion problem. The positive measures in this budget see the SNP desperately trying to fix a few of their own mistakes. They want to pretend they're turning the corner on their own abysmal records. In reality, they have decimated Scotland's finances and brought our services to their knees. When I have asked SNP ministers what their plan is for desperately needed change in our hospitals, our schools, our colleges, our universities, change for our businesses, for families across Scotland, it's apparent they do not even understand the question, let alone have the answers. Their incompetence has taken Scotland's NHS to the brink, with people suffering in pain and a booming waiting list for direct flights to Lithuania for hip and knee replacements. And we have nearly £500 million each year that could be spent on Scotland's schools, upgrading our roads or building more houses. Instead, it's wasted on delayed discharge, something the SNP promised to eradicate 11 years ago. On top of that, £1 billion lost to Scotland's budget due to what the Independent Fiscal Commission calls economic performance gap, a direct result of their abject failure to grow Scotland's economy. This is the true record of the SNP government. So why on earth would a 19th John Swinney budget change Scotland's direction? Is it not the case, Presiding Officer, that the real opportunity for change is just weeks away, when a new government can deliver real change? And isn't the only way we can finally kick out this knackered SNP government and choose a new direction for Scotland is with Scottish Labour?
I'd firstly like to thank Michael Mara for Labour's decision to abstain on the budget without costing us a single penny for the second year in a row. It's most helpful, and I thank him for that. In terms of the investment in the NHS, as I set out in my statement, we've had falls in long waits for 6 months in a row. This budget puts the investment in our NHS to make sure that continues over the next few months, because we know how important that issue is for the people of Scotland. It, of course, also includes the massive investment in housing, £4.9 billion over the course of the spending review, to tackle the issues of temporary accommodation and make sure everyone has a house that is warm, affordable to live in. But, you know, there is a fundamental truth here. When Anna Sarwar said that Labour was not in a strong negotiating position on the budget, I've just got some advice to Michael Mara. Asking for something is a good start if you want to have a negotiating position on the budget. And maybe third time lucky next year, eh?
Through the chair always, Ross Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The devil, of course, is always in the detail, but I am glad the Scottish Government has accepted Green proposals to fund the likes of childcare expansion with tax rises on the super-rich, a mansion tax on £1 million homes and a charge on the 12,000 private jet flights taken in Scotland every year. Now, I've called on the First Minister repeatedly to deliver more support for the workers facing redundancy at Mossmorton, and I welcome that that proposal has been accepted. But the Scottish Greens and trade unions have called on that funding to be conditioned on guaranteed job interviews for the workers who are being abandoned by Exxon. So can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that the Mossmorton support grants will only go to businesses who offer those job interviews to the highly skilled workers who have just spent a Christmas wondering how they will provide for their families in 2026?
Cabinet Secretary.
First of all, can I welcome the productive discussions that the Scottish Greens had with me over the budget. I think the budget is better for inclusion of opposition asks, but opposition obviously have to ask for them first. On Mossmorton, of course, we are really pleased to support the workforce there and to enable the development of important economic opportunities in the area. In principle, I'm quite supportive of the suggestion that Ross Greer makes, because it is important that those workers affected are the first in line to get an opportunity for growth and business opportunities from the investment that we're going to make. So in principle, yes, and I'm sure the Deputy First Minister will take forward the details of that.
Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The question here really isn't about how the budget passes, it's about what you get out of it if it does. And the Scottish Liberal Democrats are in the business of just getting stuff done. So we've been clear with the SNP. If we see movement on our key areas of priority, then yes, there's a conversation to be had. Fixing social care, funding our colleges, flexible childcare, supporting people with neurodivergence, supporting hospices, supporting small businesses and young entrepreneurs, and that every young person deserves a home of their own. So I'm pleased to see that many of the Liberal Democrat asks do feature in today's budget. But, Presiding Officer, the eyes of Scotland's business community are also on us today. And it is good to see some positive steps on rates relief that many, including us, have called for. But too many businesses, particularly in hospitality and self-catering, are still facing choppy waters ahead. So my question to the Cabinet Secretary is this: will she continue to work with me in the coming weeks to see how further targeted additional support might give more Scottish businesses that much-needed relief that they desperately need and deserve?
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I also thank Jamie Green for the very positive and constructive engagement that he has given on behalf of the Liberal Democrats, and that he's welcomed many of the asks that feature within the budget. As Jamie Green has recognised, there is substantial support for business that I've set out in my statement. I would also recognise the importance of the independent gill review of hospitality business methods of valuation, something the hospitality sector were very, very keen on, and of course that work is going to continue with pace. Of course, I will agree to continue to work with him and others. As I've said, it is very opaque and lacking in information about what the UK Government's intentions are, if they're going to go further or not. We found out through the press, not through any communication from the UK Government, which is disappointing. But let me reiterate the point that if there are further consequentials flowing from what I guess is a U-turn by the UK Government in terms of the position in England, then of course we would want to support the hospitality sector further. So I have written to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury asking for a meeting urgently to discuss, and I know my colleagues in Wales and Northern Ireland are also keen to do that.
Call Kenneth Gibson to be followed by Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I warmly welcome the 10% increase in college sector funding, a tremendous boost to our young people and economy, and a boost the Finance and Public Administration Committee called for. The Cabinet Secretary has listened. Can she confirm the necessary funding is in place to not only purchase but redevelop Ardrossan Harbour, given that the capital allocation for Scotland's ferry services has rocketed by 18% from £182.6 to £215.5 million since the autumn budget revisions?
Cabinet Secretary.
So let me first welcome Kenny Gibson's welcome for the additional college funding. On his substantive question, the Scottish Government is, of course, committed to Ardrossan being the mainland harbour for CalMac ferry services to Arran, and the progress on the negotiations between CMAL and Peel Ports Group, which the Cabinet Secretary for Transport set out last week, is welcomed, noting that both parties are committed to confirming details of the potential purchase as quickly as possible. Our capital spending review makes provision to progress the potential port purchase and the improvements, and I'm sure that's something that Kenny Gibson will welcome.
Murdo Fraser to be followed by Joe Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As we raised in the Chamber last week, businesses across Scotland are currently facing increases in their rateable values of up to 400% as a result of the current revaluation. Any hopes that that revaluation might be delayed or scrapped altogether have been dashed today, and the reliefs announced will come nowhere close to compensating for the increases that are coming down the track. So what assessment has the Scottish Government made of the number of businesses in hard-pressed sectors like hospitality who will go to the wall as a result of the choices made by this Finance Secretary?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first of all, it is, of course, an independent process, which Murdo Fraser knows full well. We do understand the concerns, which is why Ivan McKee has been engaging with both the assessors and businesses to listen to those concerns. There is a process of pre-agreement discussions with assessors and a system of appeals, but the reliefs that I have announced today is a package of £322 million to support businesses through the transitional reliefs and the reliefs to retail, hospitality and leisure. I would have thought that that is something that Murdo Fraser would have welcomed. And of course I have been clear, if there is further funding for the hospitality sector from the UK Government, then further funding will go to the hospitality sector in Scotland. Again, I would have hoped that's something he could have welcomed.
Joe Fitzpatrick to be followed by Jackie Bailey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Colleges are of vital importance in supporting people in their learning journeys and making sure Scotland has the skills our economy needs. So can the Cabinet Secretary say more about how the college sector will be supported through her budget, in particular the ambitious plans being developed by Dundee and Angus College?
Cabinet Secretary.
So for Scotland's colleges, the budget delivers a combined increase of £70 million in resource and capital funding, equivalent to a 10% uplift on last year's budget. The Further Education Minister recently met at Dundee and Angus College to discuss their ambitious proposals, and the Infrastructure Investment Plan that I'm publishing today confirms that the Scottish Funding Council will continue to work closely with Dundee and Angus as they progress work on the options to address their local priorities through their upcoming 10-year college infrastructure plan, which is due in the autumn of this year. It is a fantastic project and very well led by local leadership in Dundee and Angus College.
Jackie Bailey to be followed by Kevin Stewart.
Health and social care partnerships responsible for delivering social care face a funding gap of £560 million in this year alone, and COSLA estimates there is a need for £750 million for next year. If the SNP is claiming that they are funding social care adequately, then why are lifeline care services being slashed? Why are health and social care partnerships declaring a social care crisis? Why are they only funding the most critical care so that people are stuck in hospital unable to get out? And why is there a growing waiting list for care assessments? And why are essential packages of care being denied? So let me ask the Cabinet Secretary, why therefore are the most vulnerable people in Scotland being let down by this SNP government?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, first of all, let me say that the over £2.3 billion for social care delivers our commitment to increase funding by 25%, and in 26-27 exceeds that commitment by over £500 million and supports an uplift to adult social care pay, as well as improvements to wider terms and conditions for workers. It's part of a package to local government of nearly £15.7 billion and, of course, freedom for them to set their council tax rates as they see fit. In addition to that, the Cabinet Secretary for Health will be meeting with local government in terms of what further steps can be taken to address delayed discharge, particularly in relation to complex care needs. So all of that work is going on. But the money that I've just talked about can only be put in place if people support this budget. So the question for Jackie Baillie is, why does she find it so difficult to press her button to support the £2.3 billion of investment in social care? That's something she will have to explain.
Kevin Stewart, to be followed by Douglas Lumsden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Tuition fees have gone up in England and Wales under Labour, but in Scotland the SNP has protected free tuition for our students. We believe that university should be based on the ability to learn and not the ability to pay. I'm pleased that the Cabinet Secretary has confirmed that this budget will continue to protect free tuition. But can she advise how many students have benefited from free tuition under the SNP?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I say to Kevin Stewart that he very much understands the importance of the investment being made in free tuition. And the point here is that if we don't invest in our young people and saddle them with that debt, then it will put people off from lower income households from going to university. I was the first person in my family to go to university, and I did so because of the supports that were in place. If I had had to face the debt that young people in England were having to face through tuition fees, I don't think I would have gone. I'm very happy to give Kevin Stewart in writing the number of students who have benefited from free tuition to date.
Douglas Lumsden, to be followed by Paul McLennan.
Presiding Officer, thousands of oil and gas jobs are lost every month while the SNP have a presumption against new oil and gas. And in the face of this jobs emergency, the SNP response is to allocate a pitiful £3 million to support former oil and gas workers into renewables. So when will this devolved government open its eyes to what is happening to the oil and gas sector and back our workers that keep the lights on for families right across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, one of the most important things we've done is demand that the UK Labour government get rid of the Energy Profits Levy. The Energy Profits Levy that Douglas Lumsden and his colleagues introduced in the first place. Something they don't like to hear about because it doesn't suit their narrative. But we will repeat it, and we will repeat it and repeat it. EPL was born out of the Tory UK government.
Paul McLennan, to be followed by Paul O'Kane.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the announcements made today to give the best start in life for children and families. This will benefit thousands in East Lothian. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary how this budget will continue to drive down child poverty and, in particular, increase support for families?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, we've put child poverty very much at the heart of this budget and the spending review, which outlines how we'll drive continued progress. This includes more than £100 million to support the delivery of a universal breakfast club offer for primary school-aged children and increased investment in wraparound childcare through the school day. In addition to our £50 million a year package of whole family support and continuing to increase our Scottish Child Payment in line with inflation, we have committed to developing the systems and the legislation to increase our Scottish Child Payment to £40 for children under the age of 1.
Paul O'Kane, to be followed by Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There are adults working in Wales today who benefited from free breakfast clubs 2 decades ago, as the Welsh Labour scheme has been up and running since 2004. The UK Labour government began rolling out free breakfast clubs in all state schools within a year of taking office and have boosted funding for after-school clubs in England to support the most isolated children. So I, of course, welcome the Scottish Government following in the footsteps of those administrations today, even if it has taken almost 20 years because of their own cuts to local authorities and to schools. But it does beg the question, if they cared so much, if they were so convinced of the benefits of the policy and they had additional money from the UK Government, why has it taken this Government so long? Surely the answer can only be that they're out of energy, they're out of time, and they need to get out of the way for a Government who will actually do the hard work of delivering.
Cabinet Secretary.
Oh, well, it's really interesting how Paul O'Kane and Labour like to quote Welsh Labour when it suits them, but when it doesn't, they're very quiet on the matter, because it's all about what happens here in Scotland, apparently, until it suits them to say otherwise. On early learning and childcare, the Scottish Government was further ahead with the investments in early learning and childcare. On the Scottish Child Payment, not available in Wales or England, which is literally putting food on the tables of families and, of course, is leading to the fact that Paul Kane cannot escape that Scotland is the only part of these islands where child poverty is falling. So we'll take no lessons from Paul O'Kane or anyone else about how to tackle child poverty, because we are doing it, and the facts speak for themselves.
Jackie Dunbar, to be followed by Sue Webber.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's welcome that the SNP Scottish Government's progressive approach to taxation means that there is more funding available to support our vital public services by asking those with the broadest shoulders to pay a little bit more whilst protecting low-income households in Scotland. Many powers over taxation remain reserved to the UK Government, but can the Cabinet Secretary give any indication as to how the budget will start to explore the use of wealth taxation within the limited powers of the Scottish Parliament?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, we, of course, have said that we will continue to look at ways of whether it's land value taxation or wealth taxation. These things are not straightforward, though, particularly within the limits of our fiscal powers currently, which of course is why I want a more fundamental review of the fiscal framework, so that the powers to be able to establish new powers that can look at areas like wealth taxation are so important. That work is at a very early stage, but happy to keep Jackie Dunbar appraised of progress.
Sue Webber, to be followed by Willie Coffey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In the budget, there was an increase in the total spend on concessionary fares and bus services, yet we know there are large parts of Scotland that are very poorly served by public transport, if at all. We're all aware of the recent decision taken by Stagecoach to significantly reduce its bus services in Dumfries and Galloway. And in the statement today, the Cabinet Secretary said that public services should be accessible where and when they are needed. If there are no buses available, then the bus pass becomes absolutely worthless. Surely, Cabinet Secretary, if the SNP are serious about tackling inequalities across our communities in Scotland, it would have been wiser to use this to fund a specific rural bus fund.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, look, we will, of course, want to ensure that our public transport availability is available as far as is possible to all communities in Scotland. And, of course, Transport Scotland is working with rural communities and others in terms of public transport commitments. But I would just say to Sue Webber that, with with tax cuts of £1 billion, that would be less money for bus services or indeed the expansion of bus routes anywhere, because there would be less money, not more money, for these things. So, as I said at the beginning of the session,
let's hear the Cabinet Secretary.
We cannot have Tory backbenchers coming here asking for more money, when their front bench is going to cut that money by £1 billion of unfunded tax cuts.
Willie Coffey, to be followed by Claire Baker.
Presiding Officer, it's vital that we press forward with work to support our town centres so that they can become more sustainable and thriving places for people to live, work and enjoy. Can the Cabinet Secretary say any more about how the budget will support regeneration of our town centres via affordable housing and other measures that can help turn the fortunes of our high streets around?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, supporting the delivery of 36,000 affordable homes and our wider all-tenure ambition, we plan to invest up to £4.9 billion over the next 4 years, of which £4.1 billion will be public investment, working with partners including the Scottish National Investment Bank to leverage additional private investment. I do think there is a real opportunity in using affordable housing resources to regenerate our town centres. Town centres are changing by the very nature of the way people have changed their shopping habits, and that means that we want to really try and get people back into living in some of our town and city centres, and I do think affordable housing can play an important role in achieving that.
Claire Baker, to be followed by Michelle Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary repeats the claim that child poverty is at a 30-year low, but you should know that that is not the case for children in relative poverty, and that the 2023-24 interim target was missed, and the Government are not on track to meet the 2030 legal target. In this budget, Table 5.07, Social Security Scotland's budget is set to go up by a third. That is an increase of some £125 million. This is more than the resources that have been freed up by the UK Government's decision to scrap the two-child benefit cap, which much of the debate around tackling child poverty in this budget has been focused on. So how is that increase justified?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, look, on the issue of children living in relative poverty, that is why we have focused so much of our resources and effort and policies to tackle child poverty. So Shirley-Ann Somerville will set out the next child poverty delivery plan in March. It will set out a raft of measures to give us the best chance of hitting that relative poverty target, which of course this Parliament signed up to. But I would hope that Claire Baker, feeling so strongly about this issue, given the measures that are in this budget to help tackle child poverty, will find a way of wanting to support this budget and the resources that are included in it to tackle child poverty, rather than just sitting on her hands.
Michelle Thompson, to be followed by Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the continued investment in the Scottish National Investment Bank as a key enabler in economic growth. The detail of the table shows that the bank can now reinvest income received. So can the Cabinet Secretary confirm if the Treasury rules are now the same as the British Business Bank? And however, just as importantly, can the Cabinet Secretary confirm if underspends at the end of any financial year, which is restrictions set by the Scottish Government, have they been removed as well?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, Michelle Thompson will be well aware of some of the changes that were made to the fiscal framework that will enable us in terms of having a flow of resources through into the next financial year, which we're very welcome. The work that we have done to ensure, with the prudent management of the finances, that we are able to pass money through into the reserve, but also reduce the use of Scotland, which of course is one of our few sources of flexible resources available to us. Michelle Thompson will be aware, though, of the limitations of the fiscal framework that I referred to earlier on. That is why I want to negotiate something far more ambitious, and that is something that I've raised with the Chief Secretary to the Treasurer on a number of occasions.
Miles Briggs, to be followed by Gillian Mackay.
5 years ago, the First Minister stated, if we are re-elected, the SNP will roll out a new programme to deliver into the hands of every school child in Scotland a laptop Chromebook or tablet to use in school or at home. 5 years on, that election pledge is nowhere near being delivered. So can the Cabinet Secretary tell me how much will be in this budget to deliver on that election pledge? In just 100 days they have left to do that. And if not, why should any young person or parent believe a word the SNP say to them in May?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, what I would say to Miles Briggs is this government has invested in our schools, invested in our teachers, invested in local government so that they can provide the education resources that are required, invested in the People Equity Fund, which enables head teachers to make some of the discrete purchasing options that they have if they wish to use those resources to support young people who would otherwise struggle to have one of those devices. Then, of course, those resources can be used for that. But it is a bit rich for Miles Briggs to come here and talk about any of these things, because his £1 billion cut to public services would not just prevent anything being delivered additional in our schools, it would impact on school budgets. There would be swathing cuts to local government, swathing cuts to the NHS, and Miles Briggs knows it full well.
Gillian Mackay, to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
We were disappointed that the Scottish Government did not find the funding to roll out truly free at 3 early years childcare, as the Scottish Greens and organisations like Pregnant Then Screwed asked for. But we also discussed wraparound provision and more free meals for school children, and we're glad that this has been accepted. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm who is eligible for these breakfast clubs? Is this free for every child? And if not, how many children will this benefit?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, first of all, let me say on the first point that Gillian Mackay made, that the childcare provisions that she asked for, we are not able to meet at this time due to cost implications. I do think, as I've said to Ross Greer in some of those discussions, that what we need is a wider review of the delivery models for childcare to ensure that there is more flexibility and that we can extract better value out of the investments that are being made. But that is a longer-term issue that this Parliament will have to look at. In terms of the wraparound provision, I'm glad Gillian Mackay welcomes it. And in terms of the breakfast clubs, it is obviously a rollout starting this year with a 15 million of investment and then ticking up next year in 27-28 to make sure that every primary school child and children in special schools are able to get that breakfast offer on a universal basis. Happy to provide further details to her.
Stuart McMillan, to be followed by Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Thanks to the consistent pressure from the SNP, the Labour UK Government finally scrapped the two-child limit in its autumn budget. So can the Finance Secretary say more about how the money that would have otherwise been spent on mitigating the two-child cap now be deployed to this Government's key mission of tackling child poverty in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, as I set out in my statement, we have reallocated funding committed to mitigating the two-child limit to drive further progress on child poverty. In the year ahead, this includes investing £15 million to meet additional demand for devolved benefits, including a further £8 million to mitigate the benefit cap. We'll also further strengthen support, increasing our Scottish Child Payment in line with inflation to £28.20 from April, and committing more than £111 million to tackling child poverty fund, and in a new package of whole family support, with further detail of the investment set out in the delivery plan by the end of March.
Alexander Stewart, to be followed by Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Social security spending now accounts for around 14% of the budget. Scotland spends significantly more than it receives, this adding hundreds of millions to the benefit bill. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary which public services she's taking money from in order to fund the Scottish Government's bloated benefits bill? And can the Cabinet Secretary seriously tell the public that their plans to spend more and more on benefits bill is sustainable?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I would like in turn to ask Alexander Stewart which groups of people they would remove help from, because they never tell us. They never tell us. The euphemisms are the social security bill is too high, but they don't have the guts to tell us who is going to lose out. Not now, not never. Until we hear that, they cannot be taken seriously.
Let's not be shouting at one another.
The updated SFC forecasts also show a substantial reduction in the Scottish Government's benefit investment over and above block grant adjustments received from the UK Government, largely resulting from the UK Government's welcome but belated reversal of the unacceptable cuts to disability benefits, which was announced on the 3rd of July 2025. And of course, the funding that we expect to receive through the Social Security block grant adjustments now covers 87% of the forecast expenditure for 26-27, and that figure will increase to 88% for 27-28 onwards, and forecast to reach 89% in 2030-31, perhaps not quite in line with the narrative that Alexander Stewart would like to give.
Philta McGregor, to be followed by Daniel Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware that I have campaigned for the introduction of universal swimming lessons for primary school pupils for a long time, so I'm absolutely delighted to hear that this is provided for in this budget. Given the huge physical and mental health well-beings of being active, can the Cabinet Secretary outline how she thinks swimming lessons for all will help us to achieve our aim of an active and water-safe nation? And, thinking to the future, how does she envisage the programme will be evaluated?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I first of all want to welcome and acknowledge Philta McGregor's history and tenacity in raising this issue. We are very pleased to be able to make this offer to young people in Scotland as part of the Summer of Sport offer. We think it is important not just from a physical activity point of view, but also from a safety point of view. And I'd be very happy to keep Philta McGregor up to speed with the development and the rollout of this very important initiative.
Daniel Johnson, to be followed by Alistair Allen.
Before this budget statement, certain hospitality businesses were facing huge rates increases of 300 to 400%. A 15% discount, given the huge scale of that increase, still means they'll be facing a huge increase in the rates bill. So why hasn't the Scottish Government decided to use its powers it has over assessors to pause the revaluation and introduce a fairer assessment for hospitality businesses in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would just point out that with the loss of the 40% relief for RHL in England, the effective relief in England is now 10 to 12%. So the 15% RHL relief, I think, is quite competitive with that comparison.
Let's hear one another.
I have set out in my budget over £320 million of support through transitional relief and through RHL relief, passing on the vast bulk of consequentials for business that we have received. To go further, we would have had to have taken money from other areas of the budget, and I was loath to do so. If Daniel Johnson wants to suggest where that should be from, he is always welcome to do so. However, if the UK Government follow through on what they've been briefing to the media about additional support for hospitality, and that results in further consequentials, then of course we will look to support the hospitality sector further here in Scotland. That's a commitment I've given on a number of occasions in the Chamber this afternoon.
Thank you. We are two-thirds of our way through the allotted time for questions. We have not yet reached half of those who'd like to put a question. I'd be grateful for concise questions and responses, and also if we could hear one another. Alistair Allen, to be followed by Megan Gallagher.
Will appreciate the budget's support for cost of living during such a financially challenging time for so many people. My constituency of Nehalen and Anir has some of the highest fuel poverty rates in the country. So can the Cabinet Secretary outline what specific support is included in today's budget for those in rural and island areas who are struggling with rising bills?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I'm deeply aware that island communities continue to face some of the highest fuel poverty levels in Scotland. This budget continues support for the Island Cost Crisis Emergency Fund, which since 2022 has distributed £4.4 million to support vulnerable households, including £1.1 million for Western Isles Council. In addition, through area-based schemes, we've invested over £13 million in the Western Isles since 2013, helping 3,500 fuel-poor households make their homes warmer. And this budget will continue advancing social and economic prosperity on our islands in line with our new National Islands Plan.
Megan Gallagher, to be followed by George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Whilst an uplift to the housing budget is welcome, the Cabinet Secretary knows that encouraging private investment is key to solving Scotland's housing crisis. And I did find it interesting that there was little to no mention of the housing emergency in her statement today, because of course a housing emergency was declared by this Parliament. The Cabinet Secretary talks a good game about attracting investment to deliver more homes, but we know that policies such as rent controls and the proposed building safety levy threatens to put additional pressure on the private sector. So can the Cabinet Secretary tell Parliament today how today's budget will support the private house building sector, and will she commit to eradicating punitive taxes that will make it more difficult for the sector to build the homes that we desperately need here in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I don't think a £4.9 billion investment in affordable housing can be accusing us of ignoring housing or the housing emergency. That is a massive investment over the course of the spending review, 800 million of which we have been clear will come from the private sector, and a lot of work is going on around mid-market rents, around build to rent, to make sure that the private sector is working in partnership with us to grow that pot to the extent that it can in order to meet the needs of the people of Scotland, and that work is going well. I'm sure something that Megan Gallagher would want to welcome.
George Adam, to be followed by Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to hear that this SNP Scottish budget will deliver record funding for our NHS. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise how this level of investment in health in the Scottish Government will impact on delivery of vital services across Scotland? And will she join me in calling opposition members across this chamber to get off the fence and back this budget so that we can provide our NHS with the funding it deserves?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I say to George Amney, he's absolutely right to welcome the funding, £22.5 billion for the portfolio. That includes £17.6 billion for NHS boards, £2.3 for social care and integration, and over £2.4 billion for primary care. All of that funding meeting the people's priorities, which we know the NHS is in terms of that investment, but also of the transformation of services. And Neil Gray, as the Health Secretary, has certainly set out some ambitious plans for transformation to ensure that as much of that money as possible goes to the frontline services.
Fergus Ewing, to be followed by Jamie Hepburn.
Presiding Officer, in documents that the Scottish Government were forced under FOI to release, it's been disclosed that Transport Scotland advised the First Minister and other ministers in 2023, 3 years ago, that there would be no money for the Nairn bypass this session of Parliament. But more than that, the position in the next 5 years would be, and I quote, equally challenging. So, very simple question for the Cabinet Secretary, requiring, I think, honesty and candour to my constituents in Nairn. Will the Nairn bypass be constructed and operational by the end of this decade, 2030, yes or no?
Cabinet Secretary.
So let me say a number of things. First of all, the Scottish Government's position has not changed, and that we remain in support of full dualling of the A96 and are progressing the dualling process from Inverness to Nairn, including the Nairn bypass. I can confirm today that investment in the trunk road network over the next 4 years will allow us to make progress on dualling the A96 between Inverness and Nairn, including the Nairn bypass. With the land acquired for the project, funding is included in the 26-27 draft budget to commence the delivery of advanced works for the scheme, along with the adjacent A9, A96 inches to Smithton scheme. And in parallel to the advanced works, Transport Scotland continues to take forward the work to determine the most suitable procurement option for delivering the scheme and therefore a timetable for delivery. The Cabinet Secretary for Transport has given a commitment to update Parliament when this work has concluded. But let me be clear, there is funding for the A96 Inverness to Nairn in the budget and across the CSR in 26-27, 27-28, 28-29 and 29-30. Something Fergus Ewing, I hope, will welcome.
I call Jamie Hepburn to be followed by Jackson Carlaw.
Just last month, we saw the Scottish Government announce £300,000 of funding for Commonwealth Theatre, with £100,000 from Creative Scotland announced as well. Can the Cabinet Secretary set out what opportunities arise out of this year's budget for continued support for the theatre and indeed for the wider cultural sector in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm very pleased to have been able to confirm an additional £20 million for the culture budget and continue to deliver on our commitment to increase culture spending by £100 million. The cumulative increase is now £70 million since 23-24, which is supporting a wide range of measures across this key sector. And of course, as the member says, we have committed £150,000 to Cumbernauld Theatre Trust in 26-27, with a further £150,000 in 27-28, subject to progress being made by the Trust to enhance its financial sustainability.
Jackson Carlaw, to be followed by Jeremy Balfour.
Presiding Officer, a fortnight ago, the Participation and Publications Committee brought a debate to this chamber with all party support on the importance of swimming, given the background of Scotland having the highest accidental death by drowning rate of any part of the United Kingdom. So can I join in Fulton McGregor's welcome of the commitment that all children should be able to enjoy swimming lessons? But can I ask for clarification? Is this a one-year commitment or is this a long-term commitment? And secondly, in the face of Scotland's golden athlete, Duncan Scott, commenting on the catastrophic reduction in the infrastructure of swimming pools across Scotland, is there anything in this budget that will halt or reverse that decline? A commitment to swimming lessons requires pools for people to be trained to swim in.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I welcome Jackson Carlaw's welcome for the initiative, initially of a one-year commitment, but I think it will then depend on how that goes and the progress in the rollout. But we're determined that this summer will be an opportunity for every young person who wants to take up the opportunity to learn to swim. And out of that, who knows, we may see other young people following in Duncan's footsteps, who sets a fantastic example. In terms of the infrastructure of pools, clearly that is an issue primarily, but not exclusively, for local government. And that's why we have, of course, supported the local government settlement over a number of years to be able to provide the local services that local people require.
Jeremy Balfour, to be followed by Claire Haughey.
Presiding Officer, I am grateful for the Cabinet Secretary's engagement on the budget. Unlike my former Conservative colleagues in Lothian, I am glad that I have been able to negotiate money for disabled charities, for Changing Place toilets and for the King's Theatre. Would you agree with me that Changing Place toilets are not only good for individuals and for families, but the economic benefit they bring to groups and charities and organisations is good for Scotland and good for the local economy?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, let me thank Jeremy Balfour for his constructive and pragmatic engagement ahead of this budget. What a contrast to his former colleagues, as Jeremy Balfour said, getting things done and working with others to actually get things for your local communities. My door has been open. Unfortunately, Craig Hoy and his colleagues have not really come through it with any constructive suggestions whatsoever. Jeremy Balfour made a compelling case that not only should funding continue for our Changing Places toilet programme, but it should be spread over multi-year periods to allow for planning and delivery of the schemes. As a result, we'll provide an additional £10 million of funding over 3 years, starting with £3 million investment in 26-27. These facilities, championed by Jeremy Balfour, will provide people with profound disabilities and complex needs with greater freedom, enabling them to access community resources more easily.
Thank you. Concise questions and responses appreciated. I call Claire Haughey to be followed by Monica Lennon.
I remind members of my register of interest. I hold a bank nurse contract with Greater Glasgow and Clyde NHS. Last week saw welcome figures which showed that through action from this SNP government, NHS waits, long waits, have decreased for 6 months in a row with significant year-on-year increases in activity. Can the Cabinet Secretary say how this budget will assist in the ongoing recovery of Scotland's NHS?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I say to Claire Hawkey that the investments in the NHS in this budget are absolutely critical, and we have made significant progress, as she pointed to, against the commitments in the Operational Improvement Plan for this year, and will continue to build on this progress through the investment of a further £100 million in 26-27 through scaling the productivity and efficiency gains to create additional capacity. This is really critical to the people of Scotland. We know the NHS is the key issue. We have made great progress over the last 6 months in bringing down long waits, and we want to continue that to ensure that people get their treatment, particularly for the hips, knees and eye operations that people have been waiting for, that they get them as quickly as possible, and this investment will help deliver that.
Monica Lennon, to be followed by Sharon Dowie.
Scotland's firefighters are demanding urgent funding to end the SNP's decade of dangerous underinvestment that has cut 1 in 6 firefighters since 2013. That is 1,250 posts, and delivered a real terms reduction in £84 million in the Fire and Rescue resource budget. Can the Cabinet Secretary explain why her budget does not reverse these cuts and fails to fix the £800 million maintenance backlog in our fire stations, equipment and ageing vehicles that are vital to protect Scotland's people, environment and infrastructure against fire, flood and storms?
Cabinet Secretary.
So we've allocated almost £436 million to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service in 26-27, an uplift of 5.4%. We'll increase the SFRS capital budget to £48.4 million to ensure that they can develop their asset base across property, fleet, operational equipment and ICT. And of course, the continued resource and capital investment will support SFRS in their ambition through their Strategic Service Review programme to better align resources to current and future risks and continue to keep our communities safe, which of course I thank them for.
Sharon Dowie, to be followed by Keith Brown.
Officer. This government has already disgracefully cut 1,000 police officers from Scotland's streets. Police Scotland asked for £104 million simply to stand still and stop numbers falling further, yet the SNP budget delivers far less than that. How does the Finance Secretary justify choosing a budget that means fewer police numbers, overstretched officers, slower response times and compromised public safety?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, we've allocated over £1.7 billion for policing in Scotland in 26-27, an uplift of 5%. That's an additional £59 million resource to the Scottish Police Authority to maintain capacity and capability in policing. We're increasing police capital funding to £86.3 million to invest in essential infrastructure technology and continue the delivery of their estate master plan. And of course, they were putting the £3 million continuation into tackling retail crime. But all of that is put at risk because of Sharon Dowie's support for £1 billion of tax cuts. None of that funding, none of it would be possible if we were to cut taxes by £1 billion. All of it would go. Police funding, college funding, NHS funding, local government funding, all of it would go. So the hypocrisy from Tory backbenchers of asking for more money is absolutely incredible and will have no credibility with the public whatsoever.
Keith Brown, to be followed by Willie Rennie.
The Cabinet Secretary be aware that I have led a campaign locally seeking extra funding for the college sector, particularly in relation to the continued existence of the Alloa campus of Forth Valley College. My constituents will be absolutely delighted by the Government announcement today of a 10% increase in funding. They will be absolutely appalled to find that the Labour Party never asked for a penny for colleges or intend not to vote for the 10% increase. Will the Cabinet Secretary confirm that, having made this fantastic announcement of a 10% increase, she has no reason to expect that the Scottish Funding Council and Forth Valley College will not now play their part and ensure the continued long-term sustainable future of the Alloa campus of Forth Valley College?
Cabinet Secretary.
So Keith Brown is right that the 10% uplift in funding for colleges will allow Forth Valley College to make strategic spending decisions in the interests of communities that it serves as soon as the Scottish Funding Council have confirmed allocations. The Minister will chair a meeting in Alloa with the FVC, the Scottish Funding Council, business and trade unions later this month to discuss. Clearly, a decision about the Alloa campus is ultimately a matter for the board of the college. Nevertheless, I have a view that the campus is valuable to the community and should remain open, and I'm hoping that the resources being made available will make that more likely.
I call Willie Rennie.
Liberal Democrats asked for support for neurodevelopmental assessments for children and young people, and we're pleased that it's in the budget. But can I ask the Cabinet Secretary about the construction of special schools? Because some of the special schools in my part of the world are the worst schools in my part of the world, and they deserve an improvement. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to come with me and visit the schools in Buckhaven and in Cooper to see for herself that why this review is essential, that it is conducted and results in new buildings?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first of all, obviously the infrastructure investment pipeline sets out a number of commitments, one of which is the next phase of the LEAP programme, which has been a very successful funding model of shared costs between Scottish Government and local government, and it has delivered. I think we went from 62% of schools in a good condition to something over 93% of schools in that condition. So a lot of progress has been made. Clearly, there are some schools that still require attention, and what I would say to Willie Rennie is that that new phase of the LEAP programme, we are keen to think about the role of special schools within that. So we will continue to work with local authorities, including Fife Council, and I'm sure Willie Rennie will be kept appraised, and I'm sure education ministers would be happy to visit some of the schools within his patch.
I call Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scotland has the highest level of disability unemployment in the UK, according to the Economy and Fair Work Committee investigation. Would it not be prudent to tackle that issue and help those who can and want to work back into work? That surely is the way to reduce the social security bill.
Cabinet Secretary.
I would have hoped that Brian Whittle might have welcomed the summer of sport. I know it's an area of interest that he's raised before, but I'm sure he will in due course. In terms of the issue that he raises, we have safeguarded the funding for employability at £90 million, but we've actually gone further than that in terms of the work that we're going to do with colleges. We were really impressed with the proposals set out by Colleges Scotland around how to support people back into work. And that will include people with additional needs who will find the college a less threatening environment to take part in some of those employability and skills programmes. So I'm really excited to see how those programmes develop with the college sector to help us make sure that we support people back into employment.
I call Audrey Nicholl to be followed by John Mason.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And community justice services play a hugely important but sadly often unrecognised role in rehabilitation of offenders and reducing recidivism. So this in turn makes a significant contribution to the Scottish Government's priorities to support families, promote well-being and eradicate child poverty. So will the Cabinet Secretary reaffirm that this budget will maintain the level of support required to deliver sustainable and meaningful community justice services across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
So yes, I can say to the member that we, of course, recognise the value of community justice. In this budget, community justice funding will increase by £10 million to a record £169 million, building on the £25 million of additional investment over the past 2 years, because we know that expanding alternatives to custody, such as diversion and community sentencing, have been proven to reduce reoffending and have been proven to be very successful.
I call John Mason to be followed by Claire Adamson.
Thank you. Normally when we face an emergency, we put aside good things to focus on that emergency. And if we really have a housing emergency, should we not be setting aside more of the expenditure, such as roads, and putting more money into housing?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I say to John Mason that we are putting more money into housing, £4.9 billion of investment over the spending review period. £4.1 billion of that is public investment that will lever in at least a further £800 million of private sector investment in things like mid-market rents, build-to-rent, all of which will contribute towards the delivery of affordable homes. So I hope that is something that John Mason will welcome. It is one of the biggest capital investments across all of our capital funding, given that capital is reducing after this year, unfortunately, due to the UK Government spending review. It is quite a commitment that we have marshalled the capital resources available to us and prioritised affordable housing.
Claire Adamson, to be followed by Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, Scotland has always taken its international responsibilities very seriously indeed, and we have a proud tradition of supporting those in need. This is, of course, reflected by the Government's ambitions in terms of climate justice and reparation. Can I ask what provision in this budget makes for funding of international development, particularly regarding issues connected to climate justice?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I was very pleased to be able to increase, as I said in my statement, the funding to international development. Something that I think says a lot about the values of this government. I think that are in tune with the values of the Scottish people, something that I find it quite difficult to understand the hostility of the Tory benches to increasing investment in international development, because by investing in international development, I think is part of the contribution to making the world safer, because we know through sustainable communities, particularly in third world countries, and helping them to help themselves, that is a good investment and one that we are proud to make.
Liam Kerr, to be followed by Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I declare my interest as a practising solicitor. The Scottish Courts and Tribunals Service warned that without a £40 million baseline uplift, trials will be delayed, such that some would take over 2 years to conclude. This budget delivers £4.2 million, a tenth of what is needed. So what advice does the Cabinet Secretary have for victims of crime waiting over 2 years for justice?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, under Liam Kerr's plans, that budget would be cut because there would be £1 billion less to spend on public services. So members on the Tory benches cannot come here and ask for more money when they want to cut investment in public services by £1 billion. I have met with the Lord President and we have discussed the requirements of the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service. We will continue to discuss those matters, but the investments that we are making across the justice system will ensure that people receive justice in a timely manner, and that is what this government is focused on.
And Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I welcome this budget, showing that Scotland is in safe hands with this SNP government. In comparison to previous disastrous Westminster governments, this government is putting the most vulnerable at the heart of their budgetary decisions. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, what will this do for rural communities and for our rural economy, particularly against a backdrop where Westminster have slighted our rural community?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I can say to Karen Adam that there is substantial investment in our rural communities in terms of continuing the work in supporting our agricultural sector, but also in terms of the peat restoration and the forestry investment. These are really important investments, not just in terms of the local economies and jobs, but also in terms of our climate ambitions. In addition to that, there is some really ambitious agreements that are being worked on with our island communities, with the accelerator model for Shetland, Orkney and the Western Isles. That has the potential to lever in hundreds of millions of investment, and again, very happy to keep Parliament updated about these developments.
Thank you. That concludes the ministerial statement. There will be a short pause before we move to the next item of business.